I want to let you know that this story deals with sensitive and emotional topics. Please watch with care if you find such content difficult. Every 911 dispatcher has that one call, the one that hits different, the one you just can't shake, no matter how tough you are. It's the kind of call that splits your life into a before and an after. And for first responders in Sherrill, New York, that moment happened on a bright July morning back in 2011. Now listen, this call wasn't chilling because of what was said. It was that raw, gut-wrenching screaming in the background. You know, something's gone way off the rails when the noises under the words just rip through the phone line and hit you in the chest. Quick thing before we start, where are you watching from right now? What time is it there? What's the weather like? And tell me, what case do you want next? Leave it in the comments. I go through everyone. Make sure you're subscribed. Let's go. The address was on Noyes Street in what they call the smallest city in America. Picture it, a tree-lined block where neighbors wave, kids leave their bikes out front, and the loudest thing all summer is usually someone's lawnmower. But y'all, on this morning, all that perfect peace was about to get shattered in ways nobody could imagine. When the first squad car rolled up, everything was dead quiet. The house looked like any family home, nothing out of the ordinary, nothing to tip you off. But every cop's got that spidey sense, and they knew, walking up on that porch, something was seriously wrong. Nobody answered the door. And when they tried to get in, the door wouldn't budge. It was barricaded from the inside. And here's what you got to ask yourself. What's running through a first responder's mind in a moment like that? Hostage, home invasion, gone sideways. I mean, every option's a nightmare. The chaos on the call had gone silent now, replaced by that kind of heavy, waiting quiet that honestly makes your skin crawl. When they finally breached the door, the first floor looked almost stage spotless. Toys in their baskets, family photos smiling from the mantle, whole place radiating with that happy home vibe. But the cops didn't relax. They moved slow toward the stairs, their nerves on edge. As they started up, that's when things took a turn, signs of a struggle, hints that violence had just swept through. Upstairs, as they opened the master bedroom door, what they found stopped everyone in their tracks. The scene in that room, it defied words. Officers froze, their training kicking in, adrenaline pumping, and all you can do is wonder what goes through their minds, because nobody comes back from witnessing that. Before the house on Noyes Street became a scene out of a nightmare, it was just a regular home filled with laughter, music, and the kind of chaos only kids can bring. And at the heart of it all, a little girl with a smile that could light up the whole block, 6-year-old Lauren Belius. Now, folks, to get why this story hits so hard, you gotta understand Lauren was way more than just another name on the news. She was a twin, bonded to her sister Leah in a way only twins truly get. They were basically attached at the hip, always in their own world, swapping secrets and dreams. Losing Lauren didn't just mean Leah lost a sister, it meant she lost a piece of herself. Lauren had that fire, always on the move, always laughing, never doing anything halfway. She'd tear up the soccer field with her signature pigtails flying behind her, then turn around and crush it at ballet class with the same energy, all grace and confidence. She loved every animal she met, and honestly, the way she cared for even the tiniest critters puts a lot of adults to shame. But what really made Lauren stand out was her heart. She didn't just care, she gave in a way that's rare for anyone, let alone a little kid. Check this out. A few months before that awful day, Lauren decided to cut her long, beautiful hair and donate it to Locks of Love to help other children going through tough medical battles. Imagine that, a 6-year-old doing something that selfless just to put a smile on another kid's face. That's the kind of girl Lauren was. Her family, they talk about the pride in her eyes after that haircut, how she couldn't stop smiling because she knew she'd done something good, and that right there tells you everything you need to know about Lauren Belius. She wasn't just a daughter, a sister, or a friend. She was that rare soul who made her world brighter, one small act of kindness at a time. So when we talk about loss and about justice, Don't let yourself forget this isn't some cold case file. This is a story about a real little girl who was loved beyond words. Someone with a world of potential ahead of her, a chance to run down more soccer fields and steal more hearts along the way. Knowing who Lauren was, her spirit, and the huge heart she carried around makes what happened that much tougher to stomach. That's why every question in this case stings. Because this isn't just about catching a criminal. It's about honoring the memory of a kid who truly made the world better. For any single mom of 3, piecing life back together after divorce takes real courage. Every day turns into a tightrope, walk school runs, scraped knees, late night homework. Somehow, Allison Bellius managed it with grace, making her kids the center of her world. Then David Tribblecock entered her life. And y'all, let me tell you, at first glance, he looked like just what this family needed. They met on the job, nothing fancy. David came off as smooth, dependable, the guy who actually pays attention when you talk. And you know what? He didn't flinch at the idea of a ready-made family. Allison, who'd been through real heartache, suddenly had hope again. Their relationship grew bit by bit. Then came that huge step, introducing him to the kids. Every single parent out there knows this is a leap of faith. You're not just bringing a partner into your life, but asking your kids to open up to someone new. For Allison, it felt like a miracle. The kids adored David. He didn't just date her, he fit right in with the crew. He took Alex, Lauren's big brother, fishing, those bonding moments that really mean something to a growing boy. He was always out back, pushing Lauren and Leah on the swings, his deep laugh blending with their happy shouts. Soccer games, ballet recitals, movie nights, David was there, fully in it with the family. From the outside, and for a long time even for Allison and the kids, this was what a comeback story looks like, a blended family finally getting a shot at real happiness. David moved in, and that house went from a fortress of survival to a home full of hope. Allison herself said he was her best friend, the one she could count on through anything. And here's the creepiest part, folks. Knowing what we do now, we all look back searching for cracks, for warning signs in those happy moments, some shadow behind his smile. But the truth? There was nothing, no hint. To everyone inside and out, he was the perfect guy, the dream stepdad. Think about it. What's scarier? A monster who looks like a monster, or a monster who looks like the guy next door? David Trebblecock wasn't some shadow lurking in the dark. He was the one reading bedtime stories, patching scraped elbows, trusted 100% with Allison's kids. He didn't push to get in. He was welcomed open arms, open hearts. And that's what makes this story so haunting. It's not just about what happened in one locked room. It's about the man they let in, the man they called family. How does the person who brings so much peace and laughter also bring total destruction? It's almost impossible to wrap your head around. The loving partner and the brutal killer were the same man. So, who was David Trebblecock deep down? What was hiding behind that perfect family man's smile? In stories where things slowly go off the rails, it's never just one big disaster. It's always a bunch of tiny cracks that creep up when nobody's looking. For David Trebblecock, the guy everyone thought was Mr. Perfect, the warning signs started popping up months before that July morning. At first, they were subtle, easy to write off as bad luck or stress. But soon, those cracks turned into gaping holes nobody could ignore. First came the job trouble, the steady gig that made him seem like a solid catch. He up and quit, no long talks, no warning. Said he wanted more time with family, but the vibe at home just got weird. David wasn't some chill stay-at-home dad. He was watching everything now, keeping tabs. His world shrank down to just the house, and the tension slowly amped up. Then, paranoia creeped in. At first, David complained about shady coworkers, as if folks were out to get him, but it escalated quickly. Suddenly, the neighbors were acting strange, maybe following him. Strangers on the street looked suspicious. For Allison, it was impossible to wrap her head around where was the easygoing guy she fell for. And the Bible? Out of nowhere, David started carrying it everywhere. Not reading it, not quoting it, just clutching it like it was some kind of magic shield. He'd sit there, white-knuckled, holding onto it tight, Whatever battle was going on in his head, nobody else could see it. Audience, let's pause right now. Imagine being in Allison's shoes. Your partner, the one your kids adore, starts morphing into someone you barely recognize. What do? Most people make excuses, right? He's stressed, it's a rough patch, he'll bounce back. You hang on to hope that the person you love will show up again. But then comes the bombshell, the moment that shatters everything. David breaks down one night, sits Allison down, and just unloads. He admits to addiction, says he cheated, and then drops a confession nobody can ever unhear. He's had a encounter with a minor back in the day. Let's stop and think. What would you do? The guy living under your roof, sharing dinners with your kids, confesses to being the very nightmare parents fear most. These weren't just red flags now, this was a siren that should have sent him packing instantly. But real talk, love messes with logic. David didn't act like a monster. He acted like a broken man, begging for help, promising change, swearing up and down that counseling would fix him. All those months of trust? He used them to plead for a second chance. Faced with this horror, Allison chose hope over fear. Chose to see the man she knew, not the one he confessed to being. She put her faith in love, in healing, in redemption, and tragically, that choice to hope and forgive instead of protect would become the single most devastating mistake she ever made. July 29th, 2011. It started like any other bright summer morning in Sherrill, New York. Fire, quiet, warm, and calm, the kind of day where the air feels lazy and life feels predictable. Birds outside, a lawnmower in the distance, sunlight spilling across the neighborhood. Nobody in that town could have guessed how quickly peace would turn to panic, or how one family's world was about to change forever. Inside the Belius home, Allison stirred awake just like any other morning. Her kids were still asleep, soft footsteps padding upstairs, the usual household sounds that make a home feel alive. But downstairs, David Treblecock had already started acting strange, calm, focused, like a man working through a plan only he understood. There was no shouting, no sign of rage, just a cold, methodical quiet that didn't belong in a loving home. He went through the house slowly, checking doors, moving objects around in eerie silence. At one point, he led the family dog into the garage and closed the door behind him. It was a small action, but it told a story. It was as if one of control, not chaos. It was as if he wanted to remove every possible obstacle from what he was about to do. Upstairs, Allison heard faint noises at first. The scrape of wood, a dull thump, something shifting against her bedroom door. At first, she thought maybe one of the kids was playing, but then she noticed the silence that followed, that unnatural kind of quiet that makes your chest tighten. She sat up, listening. Then she tried to open the door, and it wouldn't move. Her first reaction was confusion. Then fear crept in. She called out, her voice shaking just enough to betray it. On the other side of the door came a calm, flat reply. Just go back to sleep. The words didn't sound like David anymore. They sounded detached, rehearsed, and deeply wrong. That's when instinct kicked in. Any parent knows the difference between ordinary tension and danger. Allison's heart pounded as she shoved at the door, realizing something heavy was blocking it. It didn't make sense. Why would David do that? Why lock her in? Then came the sound that no parent can ever forget, her child's voice, crying out. Fear turned into pure adrenaline. She didn't think, she just moved. Allison threw her shoulder against the door again and again, feeling it bend but not give. Each impact sent a jolt of pain through her, but she kept going. All she could think about was her kids, their safety, their lives. She shouted for help, her voice echoing down the quiet street outside. Somewhere, a neighbor stirred, wondering what was happening. Finally, with one last desperate push, the door splintered open. The house that had once felt warm and familiar now looked like a stranger's home, silent, eerie, frozen in time. Allison's eyes darted from room to room, searching, calling out names. The air was thick, heavy, charged with something she couldn't explain. And then she saw David, standing in the hallway, eyes blank, movements robotic, as if he wasn't really there. What happened next was fast, chaotic, and surreal. Allison rushed forward, driven by something primal, a mother's instinct stronger than fear. She didn't stop to think or question, she just acted. Every part of her body was focused on one mission: protect her children at all costs. The moments that followed were pure survival. There was no logic, no order, BNIS, just frantic motion, pleading, panic, and the desperate need to stop the unthinkable. Allison fought not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, with every ounce of strength that love could create. Neighbors later recalled hearing screams, cries for help, the kind that pierce through walls and make you freeze in place. A few rushed outside, not knowing whether to run toward the noise or away from it. Someone grabbed a phone and dialed 911, their voice trembling as they tried to explain what they were hearing. Inside that house, time slowed. For Allison, every second stretched into eternity. Her thoughts blurred into one looping question: why? Why was this happening? Why the man she trusted? Why this moment, this home? And yet, even in the chaos, she didn't stop. She called out for her daughter, for help, for someone to wake her from what felt like a nightmare she couldn't escape. The house that once held laughter and bedtime stories now felt like a maze of heartbreak and confusion. When officers finally arrived, they broke through the front door to a scene of devastation. Not graphic, not cinematic, but emotionally shattering. A mother on the floor, trembling, hands shaking, doing everything humanly possible to save the child she loved more than life itself. Her clothes torn, her face streaked with tears, whispering prayers no one could quite hear. Paramedics moved quickly, working with the kind of precision that comes from training and heartbreak all at once. The neighbors watched in stunned silence as the family they'd waved to every morning was suddenly surrounded by flashing lights and stretchers. That morning would forever be known in Cheryl as the day the quiet stopped. For Allison, it wasn't just the worst day of her life. It was the moment everything she'd believed about love, safety, and family collapsed into dust. But through it all, she never stopped fighting. Even in her darkest hour, she showed what it means to be a mother, to run toward danger, to stand between her children and chaos, and to keep fighting even when the world is falling apart around you. As the sun climbed higher in the sky that day, the house on Noyes Street stood still, surrounded by police tape and disbelief. The air was thick with grief, but beneath it, courage, the kind of courage that doesn't make headlines, but defines who we are when everything is taken away. And for Allison, that morning would never end. It would replay in her mind forever. The sounds, the silence, the heartbreak. But somewhere inside that unbearable pain was a small, stubborn truth. She did everything she could. She fought until the very end. And that's something no one, not even tragedy, can take from her. When first responders arrived at the Belius home, the world seemed to tilt off its axis. Flashing lights painted the quiet neighborhood red and blue, the hum of sirens faded into the distance, and everything else fell eerily still. Inside, what they found was not a crime scene in the sensational sense. It was heartbreak frozen in time. Allison was alive but shaken to her core. Her voice trembled when she tried to speak, her hands trembling even as paramedics wrapped her in a blanket. There was shock written all over her face, not just at what had happened, but at who had done it. Her mind couldn't process how the man she trusted, the one she'd shared laughter and life with, could turn her home into something unrecognizable. David Treblecock was found nearby, dazed and unsteady, muttering words that made no sense. He didn't run. He didn't resist. He just stared into nothing, like a man who'd stepped out of his own body. Officers led him out carefully, unsure what to make of what they were hearing, and then, without warning, he began to speak. In a low, detached tone, time the kind that chills you more than screaming ever could, David told officers he had been following divine orders. He said he hadn't acted out of anger, but out of obedience. The words he used were hauntingly clear. Jesus, made me do it." For the officers who'd seen just about everything, those 5 words were enough to stop them in their tracks. One detective later said it felt like standing in a doorway between sanity and madness, Bach one step away from sense, one step away from something much darker. Back at the station, the recording of that statement would become the most analyzed piece of evidence in the case. Every word, every pause, every inflection dissected by lawyers, psychologists, and investigators alike. The question was no longer just what David did, it was why. Was he truly consumed by delusion, or was this the start of a carefully crafted defense? When detectives retraced his steps from that morning, they started seeing things differently. The way he'd locked the doors, how he had isolated the dog so no one would be interrupted, the fact that he had deleted files from a computer days before, none of that looked random. None of it looked like someone out of touch with reality. It looked like planning cold, calculated, terrifying in its quiet precision. Yet, even with all that evidence, something about David's demeanor didn't fit the mold of a typical criminal. He wasn't angry, wasn't defensive. He seemed detached, as if he'd accepted what he did as necessary. To him, it was a mission completed. That's what made it even harder to comprehend. Meanwhile, as word spread through Cheryl, the shock rippled through every street and school hallway. The Bayliss family wasn't just known Don, they were loved. Lauren's smile, her twin sister's laughter, their mom's warmth. This was the family people pointed to as a symbol of resilience after hardship. Neighbors came to the scene in disbelief, leaving flowers, drawings, and soft toys on the lawn. The sight of that quiet home wrapped in yellow tape broke everyone's hearts. Parents hugged their kids tighter that night. Conversations at kitchen tables across town turned into whispered prayers. By evening, blue and purple ribbons, Lauren's favorite colors, began appearing on mailboxes and tree trunks. Churches opened their doors for vigils. The sound of candles being lit replaced the sound of sirens. People didn't need to know the details. They already knew enough. A bright, young life had been lost, and the person responsible wasn't a stranger from the shadows. He was. He was someone who had been invited in with love. As Allison recovered in the hospital, surrounded by family and community support, detectives and prosecutors began preparing for what would be one of the most complex trials the county had ever seen. The facts were horrifying, but the psychology behind them was a maze of contradictions. David's defense team wasted no time in building their argument, insanity. They painted him as a man overtaken by paranoia and delusion, someone who'd lost the ability to separate his thoughts from reality. They said he believed he was chosen for some higher purpose, that he'd been hearing voices, receiving divine signals, that the tragedy on Noy Street wasn't the act of a killer, but of a mind consumed by illness. But prosecutors saw it differently. They saw intent, not confusion. They saw preparation, not panic. They believed David's so-called delusions were an excuse, a cover for a man who wanted control and used religion as a shield. They pointed to his confession the week before about betrayal, guilt, and dark secrets, and argued this was not sudden madness. It was an escalation. The phrase, "Jesus made me do it," echoed across every headline, every news broadcast, every dinner conversation. It became a symbol, not just of tragedy, but of how blurred the line between evil and insanity can be. Reporters camped outside the courthouse. Psychologists were brought on TV to explain what could drive a person to believe such things. And through it all, Allison stayed silent. She didn't need to speak for the world to understand her pain. Her silence said enough. In those weeks after the crime, Cheryl wasn't just mourning a loss, it was questioning its own sense of safety. People locked doors that had never been locked before. Parents double-checked windows. Kids asked questions their parents didn't know how to answer. But amidst that grief, the community rallied. Fundraisers were held to help the Bayliss family recover. School teachers made memory boards for Lauren. A mural of bright sunflowers, I Left Team, her favorite, was painted near the playground she used to run through. The story that started as one family's nightmare became a collective vow. a promise that Lauren's name would not be forgotten and that Allison and her surviving children would never stand alone again. And yet, behind every act of kindness, there lingered the same haunting question that kept prosecutors awake at night. If David truly believed his actions were divinely guided, did he ever know the difference between faith and delusion? Because if he didn't, how do you punish someone who doesn't know he's guilty? And if he did, how do you ever forgive him? That question, the one that sits between justice and mercy, would soon become the center of a courtroom battle that divided an entire town. And for Allison, who had already survived the unimaginable, that fight was only just beginning.
The court finds that Mr. Treblecock lacked criminal responsibility by reason of mental disease or defect.
After Judge Michael Dwyer issued his ruling, there was stunned silence in the courtroom. Then there were sobs as Lauren's mother, Allison Bilius, and other family members burst into tears.
It's just a travesty of justice for this to happen. This monster should never be able to walk the face of this earth again, as far as I'm concerned.
Also expressing disappointment outside the courtroom, prosecutor John Loopy.
I disagree with the court's verdict, but I respect the court's verdict.
In her closing arguments, Loopy played an audio tape of David Treblecock's interview with a state police investigator after Lauren's death.
For the courts, I'm not crazy.
And Loopy argued Treblecock knew killing Lauren was wrong and was aware of the consequences. But Judge Dwyer said the most convincing testimony came from Dr. Lawrence Farrago. He was originally hired by the prosecution, but because of his findings, ended up testifying for the defense.
Everything he looked at and studied pointed to the conclusion that the defendant suffered from paranoid schizophrenia, and this, without question, caused the defendant to lack the capacity to know or appreciate, one, the nature and consequences of his conduct, and two, that his conduct was wrong.
Judge Dwyer says from this point, 2 psychiatrists will evaluate Treblecock. If it's determined he has a dangerous mental disorder, he'll be sent to a secure mental facility for 1 year. After that, he can be held for additional 2-year periods of time. Reporting from the Oneida County Courthouse, I'm Jessica Kane.
A courtroom is just a stage for a tug of war, 2 stories, each fighting for your attention, each swearing it's the truth. The case against David Treblecock was no different. For the 12 folks in the jury box, this was no simple whodunit. They faced 2 wildly different versions of the same man. The defense rolled out their big guns, a diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia. Expert after expert hit the stand, painting a dark picture. Delusions that hijack reality, voices whispering twisted commands, a mind in full meltdown mode. According to their story, David's spiral started long before that awful morning. The paranoia that made him suspicious of coworkers, the Bible clutched like armor, these were all symptoms, not quirks. And when the worst happened, David was already lost in a nightmare world where Lauren wasn't a child but an evil force to be destroyed. In his mind, he believed he was a holy warrior, following orders from above. Their shrinks swore David didn't understand right from wrong. He wasn't a monster, just a broken man, fighting a battle nobody else could see. In the moment, they claimed, he couldn't stop himself. Justice, they argued, meant treatment, not punishment. But the prosecution wasn't buying it. Sure, maybe David was troubled, but those expert witnesses didn't erase the timeline, the planning, the confessions, the pattern. Remember, before all this, David spilled his darkest secrets to Allison: addiction, cheating, even a past with a minor. Was it just fate that his obsession turned deadly toward a 6-year-old girl? The prosecution said no way. They hammered home the details: locking up the dog, trashing a computer's hard drive, barricading doors. Would a totally crazed guy think to cover his tracks? Or was this a predator working his plan to the letter? Everyone watching, let's be real. It's terrifying to face the gap between sickness and evil. Who's responsible when reality breaks? Should pain get punishment or a shot at healing? For the jury, these weren't just legal questions, they were gut punches. On one side, doctors said David was legally insane. On the other, hard facts showed he knew exactly what he was doing. As lawyers wrapped up, the Balius family waited in agony. The jury stepped out, the entire room holding its breath. In that silence, it wasn't just a killer on trial, it was the whole system. For the Balius family, waiting for that jury verdict felt like torture. Day after day, they pinned their hopes on 12 regular folks, believing justice would finally honor Lauren's memory. Then the word came down, the jury had reached a decision. The courtroom held its breath, every eye locked on those jurors, faces unreadable. And then came the shocker, not guilty by reason of insanity. Just like that, everything flipped. To Lauren's family, it felt like another attack. Their little girl was gone, and now the system itself dealt a second blow. David Treblecock wouldn't go to prison, he'd go to a locked psych hospital. But here's the kicker, periodic reviews meant one day he could walk free. Audience, imagine that pain. The man who destroyed your world might get his freedom back. For Allison Balius, grief turned to white-hot rage. She fought in that bloody bedroom, and now she had to fight all over again just to keep her daughter's killer behind bars. But from that heartbreak, something powerful was born. Allison transformed from grieving mom into a warrior for change. She realized the law was broken, wide open for monsters to slip through and someday walk free.
I don't care if he's in a lockdown facility for mental health or a prison. I just want to know that he's not anywhere where he can hurt anybody else, because he will.
2 years ago, Allison Balius was stunned to find out that the man who killed her daughter was going to be held in the mental health system, not in prison. David Treblecock killed 6-year-old Lauren Balius, brutally stabbing her back in 2011 in the home in Sherrill that he shared with Allison.
And I don't think he would have stopped until we were all dead that day.
Allison thinks he's locked up, but because he's in the mental health system, she's not sure.
There's nothing for us, no protection, and we never know when he'll get out.
She does not feel safe, not for herself or for her surviving children.
He's got no criminal record, so if he is discharged at any time, then there's no warning to anybody else that he's done the things that he's done.
What Allison is advocating for now is something she's calling Lauren Sylvia's Law. It would make us keep better track of people who kill, and she's already getting a lot of support. She has over 20,000 petition signatures.
We think a murderer is a murderer, no matter the circumstances. He knowingly took the life of a child and should have to pay for that, and she'd have to stay someplace for at least 25 years, hopefully for the rest of his life.
And in the name of her daughter, and to protect her remaining family, Allison is fighting for a change in the law.
So she channeled pure mom energy into a cause to make sure nobody else would ever face the same nightmare she did. That's where Lauren's Law started. Allison worked with lawmakers, campaigned, showed up at every hearing, telling her painful story again and again. She wanted it simple. If you dodge prison for a violent crime by pleading insanity, you still get the same minimum sentence. For David, that meant at least 25 years before parole, no shortcuts, no loopholes. The fight was brutal, but Allison never backed down. Her voice became a force. By 2012, Lauren's Law was signed in New York State. And here's the hope, folks. Lauren's memory now shields families all over. Her name isn't just a headline, it's a shield, a legacy. Alex and Leah, Lauren's siblings, grow up in a world changed forever by her story. But the law that bears her name will protect countless kids, moms, and families for years to come. So when you think of Lauren Balius, remember, she wasn't just a victim, she was a girl with a giving heart. In life, she gave away her hair just to help someone else. And in death, her story became a gift for all of us, a legacy of safety and hope.